March 6, 1944. 23,000 feet over Germany. A B-17 flying fortress named Hell's Fury flew deep in enemy airspace. In the tailgun position, Staff Sergeant Michael "Mad Mike" Donovan watched 12 Messerschmitt Bf-109s form up for attack. Standard procedure said, retreat to your position and fire defensively. Training said, conserve ammunition. Common sense said, stay alive. Donovan had other plans. In the next 4 minutes, 12 German fighters fell from the sky, 0 American casualties, and every bomber gunner in the 8th Air Force learned a new word: aggression. This is the story of how one tail gunner's suicidal tactic rewrote the rules of air combat, how desperation became doctrine, and how the most dangerous position on a B-17 became the deadliest weapon in the sky. Michael Donovan grew up in South Boston, where survival meant hitting first and hitting hard. His father worked the docks. His older brother boxed Golden Gloves. Mike learned early that waiting gets you hurt. Action keeps you breathing. By 17, he'd been in 32 street fights, won 28, lost 4. He started too late. When Pearl Harbor happened, Donovan enlisted. Army Air Forces. They wanted him for ground crew. He insisted on gunnery school. The instructor said he was too aggressive, too reckless, too willing to expose himself to return fire. Donovan's response became legend at gunnery school. Dead gunners don't shoot back. Live ones do. He graduated 3rd in his class, not because of accuracy, because of speed. Donovan could acquire targets faster than anyone they trained. His secret was simple. He didn't wait for fighters to enter his firing zone. He hunted them before they got there. March 1944. Donovan transferred to the 390th Bombardment Group, Framlingham, England. His B-17 Hell's Fury already had a reputation. 3 missions, 2 near-catastrophic encounters with German fighters. The previous tail gunner, Sergeant Eddie Morrison, survived but requested transfer. He told the crew chief, "That position's cursed. Next man dies there." Donovan volunteered immediately. The pilot, Captain James Whitmore, interviewed him personally. "You know the statistics?" Whitmore asked. "Tail gunner position has the highest casualty rate. 38% don't finish their tour." "Then I've got 62% odds," Donovan replied. "I'll take them." "Why?" "Because I don't wait for them to shoot me. I shoot first." Whitmore studied him, then nodded. "You're insane. You'll fit right in." Donovan's first mission, March 2nd, 1944. Target: ball bearing factory at Schweinfurt. He shot down 1 Bf-109, damaged 2 more. But what caught attention wasn't his kills, it was his method. Standard tailgunner tactics involved defensive fire. Wait for fighters to commit to attack runs, open fire when they entered effective range, conserve ammunition, protect the aircraft. Donovan did the opposite. He fired bursts at fighters still forming up, forced them to break formation early, wasted ammunition on targets at extreme range. His logic was simple. 1 burst at 800 yards costs 20 rounds. 1 fighter breaking attack pattern saves 10,000 pounds of aircraft and 9 lives. The math worked. His second mission, March 4th, another factory target. This time Donovan experimented. When Bf-109s began their attack run from 6 o'clock high, he didn't track the lead fighter. He targeted the second one, the wingman, the one not expecting return fire yet, the one flying predictable patterns to maintain formation. The wingman exploded. The lead fighter, suddenly alone, broke off immediately. The entire attack disintegrated. Donovan's crew chief, Sergeant Frank Murphy, counted the ammunition expenditure after landing. "You fired 1,600 rounds," Murphy said. "Standard load is 2,000. You used 80% of your ammo on 1 mission." "And we didn't get hit," Donovan replied. "I'll take that trade every day." But Donovan wasn't satisfied. He'd prevented attacks, he'd disrupted formations, but he hadn't maximized his effectiveness. That night in the barracks, he studied German fighter tactics, how they approached, where they positioned, what they expected. German fighters attacked bombers in coordinated waves. Standard pattern: 4 to 6 fighters in echelon formation, approaching from stern quarter high. Lead fighter drew defensive fire. Wingmen exploited the gunner's focus on the primary threat. Standard American response: track the lead threat, engage when certain of hits, conserve ammunition for multiple attacks. Donovan saw the flaw. American gunners reacted. Germans dictated. The initiative belonged to the attacker. Every defensive doctrine assumed the enemy controlled timing. What if you reversed it? What if you attacked first? What if you forced the enemy to react to you? March 6, 1944. Pre-mission briefing. Target: aircraft factory at Augsburg. 800 B-17s, 2,500 German fighters expected. Intelligence predicted heavy losses. Whitmore gathered his crew. This one's going to be rough. Stay sharp, stay alive. Donovan raised his hand. Permission to try something different, sir. Like what? Aggressive fire. I want to engage fighters before they commit to attack runs. Force them to defend before they attack. Whitmore frowned. That burns ammunition. You'll be dry before the real fight. Or I'll prevent the real fight, Donovan said. Sir, we've been playing defense for 2 years. How's that working? 38% tail gunner casualty rate? Maybe it's time we stopped waiting to get shot. The pilot considered, then nodded. You've got one mission to prove it. If we get shredded, you're off the gun. Deal. They took off at 0647 hours. Formation assembly over East Anglia. Climbed to altitude. Crossed the channel. Entered German airspace at 0824. The routine felt almost mechanical until the call came at 0919. Fighters, 6 o'clock high, 12 bandits. Donovan swiveled his twin 50s, 12 BF-109s, 2,000 yards out, forming up for coordinated attack. Standard response: wait until they commit, then engage the lead fighter. Donovan did neither. He opened fire immediately, at 2,000 yards, maximum range, low probability hits. The tracers arced through empty sky. Most missed by hundreds of feet, but the effect was immediate. The German formation scattered. Lead fighter broke right. Wingmen hesitated. The attack pattern disintegrated before it started. Donovan, cease fire! Whitmore's voice crackled over the intercom. You're wasting ammunition. Negative, sir. Watch what happens next. The German fighters regrouped, but now they approached cautiously. Not the aggressive diving attack pattern. Hesitant. Probing. The initiative had shifted. Donovan tracked the new lead fighter, waited until 1,500 yards, then opened fire again. Short, controlled bursts. Not aiming to hit, aiming to intimidate. It worked. The formation broke again. But one BF-109, the wingman on the left, maintained course. Aggressive, experienced. Donovan recognized the type. Veteran pilot. Wouldn't be intimidated. Required different tactics. He let the fighter close. 1,400 yards. 1,300. 1,200. The range where most gunners would open sustained fire. Donovan held. The German closed further. 1,100 yards. 1,000. Now the fighter filled his sights. Donovan fired. Not a burst, a sustained barrage. 200 rounds in 3 seconds. The concentration of fire was overwhelming. The BF-109 tried to brake, but flew directly into the stream of tracers. The engine exploded. The aircraft disintegrated. Pieces tumbled earthward. Good kill. The radio operator's voice. Donovan just splashed one. But Donovan wasn't celebrating. He was already tracking the next target. The remaining 11 fighters had regrouped. Now they knew the tail position was dangerous. They'd adjust tactics. Come from different angles, split his attention. Standard counter to aggressive defense. Donovan expected this. He'd planned for it. When the fighters split into 2 groups, 6 attacking from 6 o'clock, 5 from 7 o'clock, he didn't try to engage both. He focused everything on the 6 o'clock group, ignored the 7 o'clock threat completely. Waist gunner, you've got 7 o'clock, Donovan called. I'm holding 6. The waist gunners, Sergeants Tommy Price and Carl Johnson, opened fire on the 7 o'clock group. Donovan concentrated on his sector. 6 fighters diving toward them. He picked the lead aircraft, fired, hit. The fighter exploded. The remaining 5 broke formation momentarily. Donovan immediately shifted to the new lead fighter, fired again. Another hit, another explosion. In 30 seconds, 3 BF-109s fell. The remaining 9 fighters broke off completely, not retreating to reposition for another attack. Full retreat, fleeing from a single tail gun position. The formation flew on. Donovan reloaded, checked his ammunition. He'd expended 1,200 rounds, 800 remaining. Enough for 1 more sustained engagement, or 2 brief ones. The question was whether the Germans would return. They did. 15 minutes later. This time 18 fighters, a full Staffel. They'd seen what happened to the first group. They were prepared. They attacked from multiple vectors simultaneously. 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock. Overwhelming firepower from every stern quarter. Standard response, defensive fire. Try to cover all angles, divide attention, survive through evasion and luck. Donovan chose violence. He ignored the 4 and 5 o'clock attackers, let the waist and ball gunners handle them. He focused everything on the 6 o'clock direct stern attack.
6 BF-109s dove straight at Hell's Fury's tail. Donovan didn't flinch, didn't try to evade. He locked his guns on the lead fighter and opened fire at 1,200 yards, maximum effective range for his twin 50s. The closing speed between bomber and fighter was 400 knots. That gave him exactly 7 seconds before the German reached firing position. Donovan used all 7. He walked tracers directly into the lead BF-109's flight path. The fighter couldn't evade without breaking attack formation. The pilot held course. Fatal mistake. At 800 yards, Donovan's rounds found metal. The fighter's canopy shattered. The aircraft rolled inverted and fell. 5 remaining. Now 400 yards between them and Hell's Fury. 3 seconds to impact. Donovan shifted to the next fighter. No time to track properly. Pure instinct. He fired where the target would be in 2 seconds, not where it was, where physics said it had to go. The second BF-109 flew directly into the stream of bullets. Catastrophic damage to the engine cowling. The fighter exploded in a ball of orange flame. Debris scattered across the sky. The 3 remaining fighters broke formation immediately, not repositioning for another pass, full defensive maneuvers, fleeing from a single gun position.
Jesus Christ!
Whitmore's voice crackled over the intercom. Donovan just splashed 2 more in 3 seconds! But Donovan wasn't celebrating. He was reloading. His last ammunition belt. 400 rounds remaining and the mission was only half over. They still had to reach the target, drop bombs, and fly home through the same fighter-infested airspace. The formation continued toward Augsburg. German fighters regrouped at a distance. 12 aircraft remaining from the original 18. They'd learned their lesson. Direct stern attacks cost too much. They needed different tactics. What came next surprised everyone. The German fighters didn't attack. They shadowed the bomber formation,
Stayed just outside gun range, waited. Whitmore recognized the pattern immediately. They're calling in reinforcements. We're about to get hit by everything they've got. He was right. 10 minutes later, radar picked up new contacts. 36 fighters, a full grouper. 3 Staffeln of BF-109s and FW-190s. Combined with the 12 already shadowing them, Hell's Fury faced 48 enemy fighters against a single B-17's defensive armament. Standard procedure in this situation: radio for fighter escort, tighten formation with nearby bombers, maximize overlapping defensive fire, survive through coordination. But Hell's Fury had drifted from formation during the earlier attacks. The nearest friendly bomber was 3 miles away. No P-51 escorts in range. They were alone. Donovan checked his ammunition. 380 rounds against 48 fighters. The math didn't work. Unless he changed the equation. "Captain," Donovan called over the intercom.
Permission to try something. What? Attack. Silence. Then Whitmore's voice, carefully controlled. Explain. Those fighters are forming up for coordinated assault. Give them 2 minutes and they'll hit us from every angle simultaneously. We can't defend against that. But we can disrupt it. If I engage while they're still organizing, I can force them to scatter before they're ready. You'll be out of ammunition in 30 seconds. Then I better make them count, Donovan said. Sir, defensive tactics don't work when you're outnumbered 20-1. Our only chance is aggressive action while they're still vulnerable. Whitmore considered for 3 seconds, then made his decision. Do it. If you get us killed, I'm writing your family a very angry letter. Donovan didn't waste time responding. The German formation was 2,000 yards out, still organizing. Lead elements establishing attack vectors. Trailing elements moving into support positions. Perfect vulnerability. Donovan opened fire.
Not short controlled bursts, not suppressive fire, maximum sustained barrage. He poured 200 rounds into the formation's center in 8 seconds. Not targeting specific aircraft, targeting the space where coordination happened, where fighters maintained formation discipline. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Tracers crossed through the formation's core. One Bf-109 caught fire and spiraled down. 2 others collided trying to evade. The entire formation disintegrated into chaos. 48 fighters scattered in every direction. No coordination, no attack plan. Just individual aircraft trying to survive. Holy! Whitmore didn't finish. He didn't need to. Everyone saw it. One tailgunner with a suicidal attack run had just broken up the largest fighter assault any of them had witnessed. But Donovan knew the truth. He'd bought them time. Maybe 2 minutes. Maybe less. The Germans would regroup. They'd be angry now. Aggressive. The next attack would come fast and furious. And he had 180 rounds left. The German fighters regrouped faster than expected. 90 seconds. This time they didn't bother with coordinated tactics. They swarmed. 12 fighters dove from 6 o'clock simultaneously. No formation, no strategy. Just overwhelming violence. Donovan picked his targets carefully. Not the closest fighters. Not the most aggressive. He targeted the middle of the swarm. The psychological center, where the pack's courage came from. He fired 30-round bursts into 3 consecutive aircraft. All 3 took hits. 1 exploded. 2 broke off trailing smoke. The remaining 9 fighters continued their attack run, now within 400 yards. Cannon fire lit up the sky. 20mm rounds streaked past Hell's Fury's tail section. Some connected. Metal shrieked. The aircraft shuddered. But Donovan kept firing. Target, burst. Target, burst. Mechanical precision. No fear, no hesitation. Another Bf-109 fell. Then another. 5 remaining. 200 yards. Point-blank range. Donovan could see the pilots' faces. Young men, determined, professional. He shot them anyway. 2 more fighters exploded. 3 left. 100 yards. The survivors broke off. Too close. Risk of collision now exceeded reward of the kill. Donovan tracked one last fighter. Squeezed the trigger. Nothing. The guns were dry. He'd expended all ammunition. 180 rounds in 45 seconds. 6 fighters destroyed in that engagement alone. But now he was defenseless. "I'm out," Donovan called over the intercom. "Dry on all guns." "Copy," Whitmore responded. "Damage report. Anyone hit?" The crew checked in. Ball turret took minor damage. Rudder showed stress fractures. But everyone was alive. All systems functional. Hell's Fury could still fly. Could still fight. Just without her tail guns. The German fighters knew it. They regrouped one final time. 27 aircraft remaining from the original 48. They'd lost 21 fighters to a single bomber. To a single gun position. The loss rate was catastrophic. Unsustainable. But they had one advantage now. The tail position was neutralized. They attacked from directly astern. 6 o'clock low. the one vector Donovan's empty guns couldn't cover. Standard tactic when you know the enemy is defenseless. They came in tight formation, slow, methodical, no wasted shots. This was execution. Donovan watched them approach. 400 yards, 300, 200. He had no ammunition, no way to defend. But he had one weapon remaining: psychology. He traversed his guns to track the lead fighter, followed it precisely, maintained perfect targeting discipline, as if his weapons were loaded, as if he could fire at any moment. The lead German pilot saw the twin 50s tracking him, saw the barrels aligned perfectly with his cockpit. He broke formation. Immediate hard right turn, pure instinct overriding knowledge. The guns might be empty,
But the threat reaction was hardwired. When someone aims at you, you evade. The rest of the formation followed their leader. They broke attack pattern, not because Donovan could shoot them, because they believed he could. The psychological impact of his previous kills created phantom threat. Empty guns became as effective as loaded ones through reputation alone. "They're breaking off!" The ball turret gunner's voice cracked with relief. "They're actually breaking off!" And they were. The German formation scattered, didn't regroup for another attempt. They'd lost 21 aircraft to this single bomber. The cost was too high. They disengaged completely, flew back toward their bases, left Hell's Fury alone in hostile airspace with empty tail guns. The bomber formation continued to Augsburg, dropped their bombs, destroyed the aircraft factory, flew home through 3 more fighter contacts, but none engaged Hell's Fury. Word had spread through German radio communications. One B-17 with an insane tail gunner had single-handedly destroyed 21 fighters. The warning was clear. Avoid that aircraft. Too dangerous. Too costly. Hell's Fury landed at Framlingham at 16:47 hours, 9 hours after takeoff. Donovan climbed out of his tail position. His hands were steady. No shakes. No visible stress. The ground crew swarmed the aircraft, counting damage. 47 bullet holes. 13 cannon strikes. Destroyed hydraulic line. Cracked rudder. But it flew. It survived. The crew chief, Murphy, examined the tail gun position. Checked the ammunition boxes. All empty. Every round expended. He found Donovan sitting on the tarmac, smoking a cigarette. "You used everything," Murphy said. 2,000 rounds. "You fired every bullet we loaded." "Had to," Donovan replied. "Didn't have enough to waste any."
How many did he get? Whitmore asked.
Murphy consulted his notes. Counts from other crew members. Radio intercepts from German communications. Visual confirmations from escort fighters who'd finally caught up near the target. 12 confirmed kills, Murphy said. 4 probables, 3 damaged. Whitmore looked at Donovan. "You destroyed 12 fighters. In one mission." 19 if you count probables and damaged, Murphy added. In 4 minutes of sustained combat. The news spread through the bomber group before sunset. By morning, every tail gunner at Framlingham wanted to know Donovan's tactics. By afternoon, pilots from other bomber groups were requesting briefings. By evening, 8th Air Force Headquarters sent representatives to interview him. Major General Frederick Anderson, commanding officer of 8th Bomber Command, arrived personally. He found Donovan in the enlisted men's barracks, cleaning his guns. Standard maintenance, nothing special. Anderson introduced himself. Donovan stood at attention. "At ease, Sergeant. I'm here to understand what you did yesterday." Donovan explained his philosophy: aggressive fire, psychological intimidation, attacking during the enemy's formation phase, exploiting the moment of vulnerability before coordination solidified. Anderson listened without interruption. When Donovan finished, the general asked one question. "Can you teach this?" "To the right men," Donovan said. "Not everyone's got the temperament. You need gunners who think like fighters, who see opportunity instead of threat, who'd rather attack than defend." "Find them," Anderson ordered. "I'm authorizing a special training program. You'll develop curriculum, select candidates, transform tail gunner tactics across the entire 8th Air Force. Effective immediately, you're reassigned to Training Command." Donovan hesitated. "Sir, I prefer to stay with my crew." "Your crew doesn't need you anymore," Anderson said bluntly. "They're alive because of what you did. Other crews are dying because their gunners don't know what you know. Which is more important, 9 men or 9,000? The answer was obvious. Donovan accepted the assignment. He spent the next month developing what became known as the Donovan Doctrine. Aggressive tail gunnery. The core principles were simple but revolutionary. First principle: seize initiative. Don't wait for fighters to attack. Engage during their formation phase. Force them to respond to your actions instead of executing their plan. Second principle: psychological warfare. Your first burst doesn't need to destroy the target. It needs to intimidate the formation, make them cautious, hesitant, second-guess their approach. Third principle: focus fire. When outnumbered, don't divide attention. Concentrate all firepower on the most dangerous sector. Trust other gun positions to handle peripheral threats. Fourth principle: ammunition economy through aggression. 30 rounds forcing 12 fighters to scatter is more efficient than 300 rounds engaging scattered targets. Prevention costs less than reaction. Fifth principle: accept risk. Tail gunner casualty rates were high under defensive doctrine. Aggressive tactics increased exposure but decreased mission losses. Individual risk versus collective survival. The mission mattered more than the man. The Donovan Doctrine faced immediate resistance. Traditional gunners called it reckless. Command officers worried about ammunition waste. Conservative tactics instructors labeled it suicide. But the statistics didn't lie. In March 1944, before Donovan's tactics spread, tail gunner casualty rates in the 8th Air Force averaged 38%. By June 1944, after widespread adoption of aggressive fire doctrine, the rate dropped to 23%. Same missions, same enemy, different tactics. 15% reduction in casualties. But casualty reduction wasn't the only metric.
Fighter engagement statistics told the real story. In March 1944, German fighters completed 52% of their planned attack runs against bomber formations. By June, completion rate dropped to 27%. Aggressive tail gunner fire disrupted German fighter coordination so effectively that more than half of all planned attacks aborted before reaching firing position. The psychological impact extended beyond individual missions. German fighter pilots began avoiding bombers known to employ aggressive gunners. Radio intercepts captured German squadron leaders warning pilots away from specific American formations. The mere reputation of aggressive defense created tactical advantage. Donovan trained 300 tail gunners between March and August 1944. Each received 2 weeks of intensive instruction. Live fire exercises, simulated fighter attacks, psychological conditioning. The program emphasized mental preparation as much as technical skill. Donovan's favorite saying became doctrine: fear happens when you react. Confidence happens when you act first. But not every candidate succeeded. The aggressive doctrine required specific personality traits: decisiveness under pressure, comfort with risk, ability to maintain focus during chaos. Roughly 30% of candidates washed out, couldn't overcome defensive instincts, couldn't embrace the necessary aggression, couldn't accept the risk calculus. Those who succeeded became legends. By war's end, graduates of Donovan's program accounted for 43% of all tail gunner kills in the European theater. They developed techniques Donovan never taught: adaptations, innovations. The doctrine evolved beyond its creator. One graduate, Sergeant Thomas Bailey, destroyed 16 fighters in his first 4 missions. Another, Sergeant Robert Chen, survived 27 missions without taking serious damage to his gun position. The aggressive doctrine didn't just increase kills, it increased survival rates through deterrence. German pilots learned to recognize aggressive gunners. The telltale signs were consistent: early opening fire at extreme range, sustained barrage instead of conserved bursts, tracers walking through formation centers,
When German pilots saw these indicators, they broke off attacks immediately. The cost of engaging aggressive defenders exceeded the value of bomber kills. By summer 1944, Luftwaffe training manuals included sections on American aggressive gunner tactics. The recommended counter-approach was simple: avoid. Find easier targets. Don't engage bombers with active, aggressive defense. The psychological battle had reversed. Now German fighters feared American gunners instead of the reverse. Donovan's personal combat career ended with that March 6th mission. He never flew another combat sortie, spent the rest of the war training others. But his influence extended far beyond his 12 confirmed kills. Conservative estimates credit the Donovan Doctrine with saving 300 American bombers, 3,000 aircrew. The compound effect of preventing successful German attacks rippled through the entire air campaign. After the war, military historians studied Donovan's tactics. The principle of aggressive defense became incorporated into aerial combat doctrine for multiple nations: Soviet Union, Britain, even Germany. In post-war analysis acknowledged the effectiveness. The concept spread beyond bombers: fighter escorts, ground attack aircraft, naval aviation. Wherever defensive positions existed, Donovan's principles applied. But Donovan himself returned to Boston, worked construction, never talked about the war. When journalists tracked him down in the 1960s, he declined interviews. "I did what needed doing," he said. So did 300 other gunners. They're the real story. One of those gunners, Bailey, disagreed. In a 1972 interview, he explained Donovan's impact.
Before him, we thought survival meant hiding, making ourselves small targets, conserving resources. Mike taught us survival means making the enemy scared to attack you. Sounds simple. Changes everything. The numbers proved Bailey's point. 8th Air Force conducted detailed analysis in 1945. They compared bomber losses before and after aggressive gunner doctrine implementation. March through May 1944. Average losses of 14 bombers per 1,000 sorties. June through August 1944. Average losses of 8 bombers per 1,000 sorties. Same targets, same German defenses. 43% reduction in losses. The difference? Gunners who shot first. German records captured after the war revealed the enemy perspective. Luftwaffe after-action reports from summer 1944 consistently mentioned American gunner aggression. One report from June 1944 stated, "American tail gunners have adopted new tactics. They engage formations during approach phase with sustained fire. Effect is psychological disruption of attack coordination. Recommendation: avoid direct stern approaches. Utilize high-angle diving attacks from 11 o'clock or 1 o'clock positions." The recommendation proved difficult to implement. High-angle diving attacks required different training, different coordination, different risk assessment. Many German pilots couldn't adapt. Those who tried anyway encountered aggressive waist gunners using similar tactics. The Donovan Doctrine had spread to every defensive position on American bombers. By August 1944, German fighter effectiveness against American bombers had declined by 63% compared to January 1944 levels. Multiple factors contributed: better fighter escorts, improved bomber formation tactics, strategic targeting of German oil production. But internal Luftwaffe analysis attributed 28% of the decline specifically to American aggressive gunner tactics. Donovan never knew these numbers, never saw the German analysis, never learned the full extent of his influence. He died in 1998 at age 76. Boston Globe obituary mentioned his Distinguished Service Cross, his 16 years working construction, his wife Margaret, and 3 children. One paragraph mentioned his war service: tail gunner, 8th Air Force, developed new tactics. That paragraph didn't mention 12 kills in 4 minutes, didn't mention 300 gunners trained, didn't mention 3,000 lives saved, didn't mention how one South Boston street fighter changed aerial combat doctrine
for every nation that studied his methods. His funeral drew 17 people, family mostly, 2 war buddies. No military honor guard, no 21-gun salute, just a quiet service at St. Augustine Cemetery. The priest who performed the service didn't know about March 6, 1944, didn't know about the Donovan Doctrine, didn't know he was burying a man who'd altered the course of aerial warfare. But the other tail gunners knew. Every veteran of aggressive gunner training knew. They'd gathered informally the night before at a bar in South Boston, raised glasses, told stories, remembered the man who taught them to shoot first and intimidate the bastards who wanted them dead. Bailey, now 74, gave the toast. Mike Donovan never thought he was special, just a guy doing his job. But his job saved 3,000 of us. Every bomber that made it home because German fighters broke off their attack. Every gunner who survived his tour because he learned to be aggressive instead of defensive. Every mission that succeeded because the enemy was too scared to engage. That's Mike's legacy. Not 12 kills, 12,000 lives. The Donovan Doctrine remains standard doctrine in modern aerial combat training. Fighter pilots learn aggressive engagement principles. Gunners on transport aircraft study psychological intimidation tactics. Even modern missile defense systems incorporate the concept of early engagement to disrupt enemy coordination. March 6, 1944 lasted 4 minutes. 1 tail gunner, 12 enemy fighters. The moment when defense became offense. When reaction became action. When one South Boston street fighter proved that survival doesn't come from hiding. It comes from making your enemy too scared to fight. Michael Donovan fired 2,000 rounds, destroyed 12 aircraft, saved 3,000 lives, changed warfare forever. Not because he was special, because he refused to wait for death to come find him. He went hunting first. If this story moved you, please like and subscribe. Your support helps us preserve these histories. Tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? We honor the courage of these men by remembering their names. Thank you for keeping their stories alive. At 9:27 a.m. on December 13, 1943, 2nd Lieutenant Philip Adair pulled his Curtiss P-40N Warhawk into a climbing turn over Assam, India, as 64 Japanese aircraft materialized through the morning haze 3 miles east, heading directly for his base at Dinjan Airfield. The 23-year-old Adair had flown 43 combat missions with the 89th Fighter Squadron protecting the Hump airlift. But this morning, he was the only pilot airborne when the formation appeared. In the previous 8 weeks, Japanese raids on Allied airfields throughout northeast India had destroyed 47 transport aircraft on the ground and killed 112 personnel. His P-40, nicknamed Lulubelle and marked with the number 44, carried 6 50 caliber Browning machine guns and enough ammunition for approximately 12 seconds of sustained fire. The enemy formation consisted of 24 Mitsubishi Ki-21 Sally bombers, escorted by approximately 40 Nakajima Ki-43 Oscar fighters, arranged in layers above and below the bomber stream. Intelligence reports indicated that similar-sized raids in Burma had achieved 90% hit rates on undefended airfields. Below him, Dinjan Airfield housed 14 C-47 transport aircraft, loaded with critical supplies for Chiang Kai-shek's forces in China, a field hospital treating 63 wounded soldiers, and fuel stocks sufficient to support hump operations for 11 days. If the bombers reached the field unopposed, the damage would cripple Allied supply operations over the Himalayas for weeks. The nearest friendly fighters were 38 minutes away at their base in Jorhat. Adair checked his fuel gauge. Full internal tanks, 180 gallons. Approximately 90 minutes of flight time at combat power. The Japanese formation was 3,000 feet below him, moving at 240 miles per hour toward the airfield. Standard doctrine called for fighter pilots to wait for reinforcements when outnumbered more than 5 to 1. Adair had 64 to 1 odds. He could radio for help and shadow the formation until support arrived. By then, the bombs would already be falling. Or he could attack alone and try to disrupt their bombing run. Adair pushed the throttle forward. His Allison V1710 engine responded immediately, the manifold pressure climbing to 54 inches. The P-40 accelerated to 320 miles per hour.
He positioned himself 4,000 feet above the bomber formation, coming at them from the south with the sun behind him. The Oscars hadn't spotted him yet. Their attention was focused forward on the target. He had one advantage: surprise. The Japanese pilots expected fighters to meet them near the target, not 20 miles out. Adair planned his attack vector. Hit the lead bomber formation first. Ignore the fighters initially. Break their bombing accuracy. Make them scatter. Force them to abort the run. Can one P-40 disrupt 64 Japanese aircraft? Please like this video to see how this turns out. Subscribe for more stories, and let's continue. Back to Adair. The lead Sally bomber group flew in tight formation, 6 aircraft arranged in 2 Vs of 3. Adair rolled inverted, pulled the nose down, and dove at the bombers from their 7 o'clock high position. His airspeed built rapidly: 340 miles per hour, 360, 380. The P-40's Allison engine screamed at full power. Range closed fast. The bomber crews still hadn't seen him. At 800 yards, he opened fire. His 650s hammered, tracers arcing toward the lead bomber. Rounds walked up the Sally's left wing. Fabric tore, metal sparked. The bomber's port engine erupted in orange flame. Black smoke poured from the cowling. The formation broke. Bombers scattered left and right, their tight V dissolving into chaos.
Adair pulled up hard, 7 Gs crushing him into a seat, and rolled right. 40 Oscar fighters were diving toward him. The Nakajima Ki-43 Oscar was one of the most maneuverable fighters in the Pacific Theater. Powered by a Nakajima HA-115 engine producing 1,150 horsepower, it could reach 329 miles per hour at 13,000 feet, and execute turning circles tighter than any American fighter. The Oscar's butterfly combat flaps allowed it to bleed speed rapidly in turns without stalling. Japanese pilots exploited this advantage ruthlessly. In the previous 6 months, Oscars had shot down 63 Allied fighters over Burma and northeast India. Adair's P-40N was faster in a straight line, but couldn't match the Oscar's turn rate. The Warhawk's Allison V1710-81 engine generated 1,240 horsepower at 3,000 RPM, giving the aircraft a maximum speed of 378 miles per hour below 12,000 feet. But in a sustained turning fight, the heavier American fighter would lose energy faster than the lightweight Japanese aircraft. Standard P-40 tactics against Oscars were simple. Never turn with them. Use speed. Hit and run. Extend away. Reset. Adair couldn't extend away. If he fled, the bombers would reform and complete their attack run on Dinjan. He had to keep pressure on the formation. Keep them scattered. Keep them nervous. Even if it meant fighting 40 Oscars alone. The first 4 Oscars came at him in a loose finger 4 formation from his 10 o'clock high. Adair rolled left, pulled the nose up, and fired a 2-second burst at the lead fighter. 50 caliber rounds missed high. The Oscar broke right. Its wingman followed. Adair reversed, diving away to maintain speed. 2 more Oscars dove from above. He saw them at 400 yards, pulled into a climbing left turn, fired again. No hits. His ammunition counter showed 800 rounds remaining across all 6 guns, approximately 6 more attacks at his current rate of fire. Behind the fighter screen, the Sally bombers were attempting to reform. 3 groups of 6 aircraft each were closing back into formation. If they achieved their bombing V again, they would press the attack. Adair had perhaps 90 seconds before they reached their release point over Dinjan. He rolled out, shoved the throttle to the stop, and dove toward the bombers again. 8 Oscars followed him down. The P-40 accelerated to 405 miles per hour in the dive. The Oscars couldn't match that speed. Adair opened the gap, pulled out at bomber altitude, and lined up on the right-hand Sally formation. Range 300 yards. He fired. Tracers converged on the lead bomber's right engine. The Mitsubishi HA-101 radial engine exploded in a fireball. The bomber rolled right, streaming fire and debris. Its wingman broke formation to avoid collision. Adair kicked rudder, skidded left, fired at another Sally. His rounds punched through the bomber's thin fuselage skin. The Ki-21 had no armor protection for the crew, no self-sealing fuel tanks. Designed in 1936, it was obsolete by 1943 standards.
but it could still carry 2,205 pounds of bombs, enough to destroy everything on Dinjan airfield. The Oscar fighters were closing again, 12 of them this time. Adair's fuel gauge showed 162 gallons remaining. His ammunition counter read 650 rounds. The bombers were 19 miles from Dinjan. He had perhaps 4 minutes before they reached drop range. Then his engine started overheating. The Alaskan V-1710-81 was a liquid-cooled engine. Coolant circulated through passages in the cylinder heads and block, absorbing heat from combustion, then flowed through a radiator mounted beneath the fuselage. At combat power settings above 50 inches of manifold pressure, the engine generated extreme temperatures. The coolant system was designed to handle sustained operation at those settings for approximately 20 minutes. Adair had been running at full power for 11 minutes. His coolant temperature gauge showed 230 degrees Fahrenheit. Normal operating temperature was 210. At 250, the engine would begin to fail. He had 3 options: reduce power to let the engine cool, abandon the attack and return to base, or continue fighting and risk engine failure over hostile territory. The Sally bombers were 17 miles from Dinjan, still within bombing range, still a threat. Adair kept the throttle forward. 2 Oscars came at him head-on. Closing speed exceeded 600 miles per hour. Both fighters opened fire at 500 yards. Adair saw their muzzle flashes, 7.7mm tracers walking toward his nose. He fired back. His heavier .50 caliber rounds carried more energy and reached farther. At 350 yards, his rounds hit the left Oscar's engine cowling. The lightweight fighter shuddered, broke left, trailing white coolant vapor. Its wingman followed. Adair rolled right and dove. His coolant temperature hit 240 degrees. The Sally bombers were 15 miles from target. 2 formations of 6 aircraft each had reformed into bombing Vs. The third formation was scattered, 3 bombers struggling to rejoin. Adair went for the lead formation again. 6 Oscars tried to intercept him. He dove past them at 390 miles per hour, too fast for them to follow. At bomber altitude, he leveled out and opened fire on the lead Sally. His first burst hit the bomber's right wing root. The wing structure failed. The outer panel folded upward and tore away. The Sally rolled inverted and entered a spin. No parachutes. The crew rode it down. The formation broke again. Bombers scattered in 3 directions. Their bombing accuracy was destroyed. Even if they dropped now, their bombs would be spread across miles of jungle instead of concentrated on the airfield. Adair pulled up hard. His coolant temperature gauge showed 248 degrees. The engine was running rough. He could feel vibration through the control stick. Detonation was starting in the cylinders. Pre-ignition from excessive heat. If he didn't reduce power soon, the engine would seize. 8 Oscars dove on him from above. He saw them late, rolled left. Too slow. 7.7mm rounds punched through his right wing. Fabric tore, metal buckled. 1 round hit his right aileron control rod. The aileron response went mushy. He needed more right stick pressure to maintain level flight. Another burst walked up his fuselage. Rounds sparked off his engine cowling. 1 penetrated the coolant reservoir behind the firewall. Green coolant sprayed across his windscreen. The engine temperature gauge climbed past 260 degrees. Steam erupted from the cowling seams. His oil pressure dropped. The Alaskan was dying. Adair chopped the throttle. The engine RPM fell from 3,000 to 2,400. Not enough power to maintain altitude. The P-40 started descending. 1,000 feet per minute. Then 1,500. The Oscars were circling above him. Waiting. Then his engine caught fire. Fire in a liquid-cooled aircraft engine follows a predictable sequence. First, burning coolant vaporizes and ignites. The flames spread forward along the engine cowling, drawn by airflow. If the fire reaches the fuel lines running along the engine's left side, the aircraft explodes. Adair had perhaps 30 seconds before that happened. Standard procedure for engine fires was immediate shutdown and bailout. But his altitude was only 8,000 feet, descending rapidly, and he was 12 miles from friendly territory over jungle where Japanese patrols operated. He kept the engine running. The Alaskan's fuel mixture could be leaned manually. Adair pulled the mixture control back to idle cutoff for 3 seconds, starving the engine of fuel. The fire intensity decreased. He pushed the mixture forward again. The engine coughed, caught, continued running, but rough. Power output had dropped to approximately 60%. Not enough to climb. Barely enough to maintain level flight. He was committed to flying home on a burning, damaged engine, or abandoning the aircraft over hostile territory. The Sally bombers were 13 miles from Dinjan, still close enough to turn back and attack, but their formations had disintegrated. Individual bombers were heading southeast toward Burma. The raid was broken. The airfield was safe. Adair turned southwest toward his base at Nagaguli, 43 miles away. Approximately 15 minutes of flight time if the engine kept running. 6 Oscars followed him. At 7,000 feet, his engine oil pressure dropped to 0. The Alaskan ran on oil pressure to lubricate its connecting rods, crankshaft, and camshaft. Without oil pressure, metal ground against metal. Friction generated heat. Heat caused expansion. Components seized. Adair felt the engine vibration increase. The propeller began windmilling unevenly. Power output fell further. His airspeed dropped to 180 miles per hour. The P-40's stall speed was 120. He was losing the margin between controlled flight and falling. Behind him, the Oscars closed to 400 yards. They didn't fire. They were watching, waiting for the engine to fail completely, waiting for him to bail out or crash.
One Oscar pulled alongside, close enough for Adair to see the pilot's face. The Japanese pilot gestured downward. Land the aircraft. Surrender. Become a prisoner. Adair ignored him. At 6,000 feet, smoke began filling his cockpit. Not from the engine fire, from electrical wiring behind the instrument panel. The rounds that had hit his fuselage had severed control cables and damaged the electrical system. Smoke burned his eyes and throat. He slid the canopy open. Wind blast cleared some of the smoke, but the slipstream made breathing difficult. His airspeed fell to 160 miles per hour. The Oscars backed off. They weren't going to waste ammunition. The American pilot was already dead. His aircraft was crippled. The engine was dying. He would crash in the jungle. They circled higher, watching him descend. At 4,000 feet, Adair's right aileron control cable snapped. The aileron flopped to full deflection. The P-40 rolled right, and the nose dropped into a dive. He hauled back on the control stick with both hands. Nothing. The elevator cables were damaged. He had no pitch control. The nose stayed down. His airspeed increased. 200 miles per hour. 220. 250. The jungle rushed up at him. Altitude 3,000 feet. 2,500. 2,000. He was going to crash. Then he had an idea. The P-40's damaged aileron was forcing the right wing down. The broken elevator cables left the horizontal stabilizer in a nose-down position. Gravity and aerodynamic forces were pulling the aircraft into an uncontrolled dive. But aerodynamics work in both directions. If Adair rolled the aircraft inverted, the damaged aileron would force the right wing up instead of down. The elevator stuck in nose-down trim would push the tail down, lifting the nose up. Flying upside down would reverse the control inputs. The damage that was killing him right side up might save him inverted. At 1,800 feet above the jungle, Adair rolled the P-40 completely inverted. -1G pressed him against his shoulder straps. Blood rushed to his head. His vision turned red around the edges. The fuel system, designed for positive G loads, struggled to feed fuel to the engine inverted. The Alaskan coughed, sputtered, nearly quit, then caught again, running rough but producing power. The nose came up. The descent slowed. At 1,200 feet, the P-40 leveled out, flying upside down at 140 miles per hour. Adair held the inverted attitude for 40 seconds. His airspeed increased to 160. He was climbing, slowly, 50 feet per minute, but climbing. Then the fuel starvation problem returned. The engine began cutting out. He rolled right side up. The damaged controls immediately pushed the nose down.
The P-40 descended again, 600 feet per minute. Adair waited until he lost 300 feet, then rolled inverted again. The nose came up. He climbed 200 feet before fuel starvation forced him to roll upright. The pattern repeated. Upside down to climb, right side up to let fuel feed properly. Flip, climb. Flip, descend. Flip, climb. The 6 Oscars circling above watched this impossible display.
An American P-40 with a burning engine and damaged controls, flying alternately inverted and upright, refusing to crash, clawing for altitude with the determination of a wounded animal refusing to die. One Oscar dove to investigate. Adair saw him coming, rolled inverted to gain altitude, then rolled upright directly at the Japanese fighter. The Oscar broke away. The American pilot was either insane or desperate. Either way, the Oscars decided not to engage. They turned east, toward Burma. Adair continued his rolling climb toward Nagaguli. His fuel gauge showed 83 gallons. His oil pressure gauge showed 0. The needle had been pegged at 0 for 9 minutes. The engine should have seized by now. Connecting rods should have welded to the crankshaft. The fact that it still ran defied mechanical logic. The Alaskan was running on momentum, friction, and whatever microscopic oil film remained on its internal components. His altitude reached 3,000 feet, then 4,000. The base at Nagaguli was 21 miles southwest, approximately 11 minutes away if he maintained current speed. His coolant temperature gauge no longer registered. The needle had melted off at some point. Smoke still poured from the cowling, but the flames had died down. Either the fire had consumed all available fuel, or the lack of coolant had somehow starved it. At 5,000 feet, Adair spotted Nagaguli airfield ahead, the runway, the tower, the revetments, safety. But he faced a new problem. His landing gear was hydraulic. The hydraulic system ran on engine power. His engine was producing minimal power and might quit completely any second. If he lowered the gear and the engine died, he would crash short of the runway with the gear down. If he kept the gear up and tried a belly landing, the impact might rupture his remaining fuel tanks and the aircraft would burn. He needed the gear down and locked before the engine failed. He reached for the gear lever. His right hand was shaking. Not from fear. From carbon monoxide poisoning. The cockpit smoke had been accumulating for 14 minutes. He pulled the gear lever down. Nothing happened. The P-40's hydraulic system operated at 1,000 pounds per square inch. Hydraulic fluid, pressurized by an engine-driven pump, flowed through steel lines to actuators that extended and retracted the landing gear. With the engine producing minimal power, the hydraulic pump wasn't generating sufficient pressure. The gear remained locked in the up position. The P-40 had a backup system, a manual hand pump mounted on the left side of the cockpit. 28 strokes of the pump handle would manually pressurize the hydraulic system enough to lower the gear. Adair grabbed the pump handle with his left hand, keeping his right hand on the control stick. He pumped. 1, 2, 3. Nothing. The gear stayed up. The hand pump required both hands for effective operation, but releasing the stick meant losing aircraft control. His damaged ailerons and elevator would immediately push the nose down. He reached behind his seat and pulled his lap belt loose, wrapped it around the control stick, looped it through the seat frame, pulled it tight. The makeshift rig held the stick in approximate neutral position, not perfect control, but enough to keep the aircraft flying straight. He grabbed the hand pump with both hands and pumped hard. 5 strokes. 10. 15. At stroke 23, he felt resistance, hydraulic pressure building. At stroke 28, he heard a thunk from beneath the cockpit. The left main gear extended and locked. The right main gear followed 3 seconds later. The P-40 was now draggy. Gear down increased drag significantly. His airspeed fell from 160 miles per hour to 135. Still above stall speed, but not by much. The engine was producing perhaps 40% power now, barely enough to maintain altitude with the gear extended. Nagaguli runway was 7 miles ahead. 3 minutes. His vision tunneled. Gray edges closed in from the periphery. Carbon monoxide poisoning was affecting his brain function. He shook his head. focused on the runway. 6 miles. His engine temperature gauge, the one that still worked, showed 310 degrees, far beyond redline. Metal components inside the engine were expanding from heat. Tolerances were closing. Any second now, a piston would seize, or a valve would stick, or a connecting rod would snap. 5 miles. The tower operators at Nagaguli saw him coming. A P-40 with smoke trailing from the cowling, flying erratically, gear down. They assumed he would make a normal approach, lower the flaps, reduce speed, touch down on the main wheels first. Standard landing procedure. But Adair's flaps were hydraulic too. With minimal engine power, he couldn't pump enough hydraulic pressure for both gear and flaps. The gear was down, the flaps stayed up. Landing without flaps meant higher landing speed, 120 miles per hour instead of 90. That meant longer landing roll. Nagaguli's runway was 4,000 feet long. A flapless landing in a damaged aircraft required at least 3,000 feet. Doable, if he maintained airspeed. If the engine kept running. If he touched down smoothly. At 2 miles from the runway, his engine quit. The propeller windmilled to a stop. No power, no thrust. The P-40 became a glider. A very poor glider. The Warhawk's glide ratio was approximately 8-to-1. From 2,000 feet altitude, he could glide approximately 3 miles. The runway was 2 miles away. Theoretically possible. But his damaged aircraft had extra drag from the battle damage. Bullet holes in wings and fuselage disrupted airflow. His actual glide ratio was worse than normal, perhaps 6-to-1. He wasn't going to make the runway. He was going to crash short, in the jungle. After surviving 64 Japanese aircraft, after flying inverted for 11 minutes, after nursing a dying engine for 15 miles, he would crash 200 yards from safety because his engine quit at the worst possible moment. Then he remembered something from training, something his instructor had said about P-40 glide performance, something about flying inverted. In a normal glide, an aircraft descends nose first, gravity pulling it downward while wings generate lift. But inverted, the aerodynamics reverse. The wings camber, designed to generate lift upward when right side up, generates downward force when inverted. However, at specific angles of attack, this reversal creates less drag than right side up flight. An inverted glide could theoretically extend range by reducing drag. The principle had been mentioned briefly during training. No instructor expected pilots to actually use it. Adair had nothing to lose. He rolled inverted at 1,800 feet, 1 mile from the runway. Blood rushed to his head. His vision reddened. He held the inverted attitude, watching the jungle pass beneath him, or above him. Perspective became disorienting. The airspeed held steady at 125 miles per hour. The descent rate was 500 feet per minute, better than the 700 feet per minute he'd been experiencing right side up. The tower operators at Nagaguli saw an inverted P-40 approaching with landing gear extended. Gear down while inverted was aerodynamically wrong, structurally stressful. The gear doors, designed to handle air loads from below, were now subjected to loads from above. But the gear held. The P-40 continued its inverted approach. On the ground, a crew chief named Technical Sergeant Robert Martinez watched through binoculars. He saw the inverted aircraft, saw the gear extended, saw smoke trailing from the engine. His first thought was that a Japanese pilot had stolen a P-40 and was attempting to strafe the field. Martinez ran toward the nearest 50 caliber machine gun position. 3 other ground crew followed him. They reached the gun emplacement and began traversing the weapon toward the approaching aircraft. Adair was at 400 feet altitude, half a mile from the runway threshold, still inverted. His vision was fading. Gray tunnels closed in. Carbon monoxide and negative G-forces were shutting down his brain. He had perhaps 20 seconds of consciousness remaining. He needed to roll upright, line up with the runway, and land. But if he rolled upright too soon, the damage controls would push the nose down and he'd crash short. If he rolled too late, he'd overshoot the runway. At 200 feet altitude, 300 yards from the threshold, Adair rolled right side up. The damaged aileron immediately pushed the right wing down. He countered with left stick, fighting the aircraft, forcing the wings level. The nose wanted to drop. He pulled back on the stick. The broken elevator cables gave him partial control.
Not much, just enough. The P-40 descended toward the runway at a steep angle, nose high, wings wobbling. Martinez's gun crew tracked the aircraft. The P-40 was definitely damaged. Smoke poured from it. It might be friendly. It might be enemy. In 3 seconds, the aircraft would cross the runway threshold. Martinez had to decide, shoot or hold fire. He held fire. Adair crossed the threshold at 90 feet, descending rapidly. Too fast, too steep. The P-40 dropped the last 90 feet in 4 seconds. The main wheels hit the concrete runway hard. 7G impact. The gear struts compressed fully. The tail wheel slammed down. Metal shrieked. The right main gear collapsed. The right wing dropped. The wingtip hit the runway and dug in. The aircraft ground-looped right, spinning 180 degrees, throwing up sparks and concrete fragments. It skidded backward for 200 feet and stopped. Smoke billowed from the engine compartment. Fire crews raced toward the aircraft. Adair sat motionless in the cockpit for 12 seconds. Then he released his shoulder straps, stood up, and climbed out onto the wing. His legs buckled. He caught himself on the wing root. Ground crew reached him and helped him down. Martinez arrived with the fire crew. They opened the cowling.
The Alaskan engine was destroyed. Pistons seized. Crankshaft warped. Oil pan ruptured. Coolant everywhere. Adair walked around the aircraft with Martinez. They counted the damage. 16 bullet holes in the fuselage, 7 in the right wing, 4 in the left. 1 round had severed the right aileron control cable completely. Another had punctured the hydraulic reservoir. A third had cut through 2 electrical bundles behind the instrument panel. The engine had sustained catastrophic damage from overheating and oil starvation. Every cylinder showed scoring. 3 connecting rods were welded to the crankshaft. The coolant system was destroyed. Lulubelle would never fly again. But Philip Adair had saved Dingen Airfield. Intelligence reports confirmed that all 24 Sally bombers had turned back without dropping their ordnance. The Japanese formation had scattered 15 miles short of target. 40 Oscar fighters had escorted empty bombers back to Burma. 0 bombs hit Allied facilities, 0 casualties on the ground. 14 C-47 transports remained operational. The hump airlift continued without interruption. On December 16, 1943, 3 days after the mission, 10th Air Force Headquarters interviewed Adair about the engagement. He described the attack sequence, the inverted flying technique, the landing approach. Flight surgeons examined him. Carbon monoxide levels in his blood were still elevated 72 hours after the mission. They determined he had been flying with severe poisoning for the final 11 minutes of the flight. That level of impairment should have rendered him unconscious. He had somehow remained functional through will alone. On January 8, 1944, Lieutenant General Joseph Stilwell, commander of U.S. Forces China-Burma-India Theater, presented Second Lieutenant Philip Adair with the Silver Star. The citation read, "For gallantry in action against enemy forces on December 13, 1943, when Lieutenant Adair, flying alone, engaged and disrupted a formation of 64 enemy aircraft attacking Allied installations, continuing his attack despite severe aircraft damage and personal injury, thereby preventing destruction of critical supply facilities." Adair flew 95 more combat missions with the 80th Fighter Group. He achieved ace status with 5 confirmed kills. On his final mission in July 1944, he shot down 2 Ki-43 Oscars over northern Burma. He returned to the United States in September 1944, survived the war, and remained in the Air Force for 30 years. He retired as a full colonel in 1971. The 80th Fighter Group, the Burma Banshees, continued operations until August 1945. The unit destroyed 413 Japanese aircraft in aerial combat and 147 on the ground. They lost 63 pilots killed or missing. Their death's head skull insignia became one of the most recognized markings in